Hello, debt warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie O'Shea. Today, we're tackling a topic that young people often overlooked: investing for retirement. When retirement feels decades away, it's easy to prioritize other financial goals like paying off student loans or saving for our first home. But the truth is, the sooner you start investing for retirement, the better off you'll be. Prioritizing your future financial security is just as important as managing your present financial responsibilities. To break this down, I'm joined by Dr. Constance Craig-Mason, CEO of Concierge Financial Advisory. She helps her clients take control of their money so they can build the life that they want. In this episode, Dr. Constance and I will discuss the power of compound interest, different types of retirement accounts, the importance of financial education, and much more. Now let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Constance. Hi, Dr. Constance. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hello. Exciting.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to having you. We're going to talk about the power of early retirement investing today, which is super important for millennials and Gen Z, especially because they're at the age where they need to start thinking about that, even though they're probably not. But we're going to tell them why they need to do that today. So let's start by, why is it important to start investing in retirement at a young age?
Well, this is a good one. And it seems like, for me anyways, that it is a really basic answer. I know that oftentimes, especially on social media, everybody wants these niche answers as to how to build wealth, but really it's the fundamentals. And when I say fundamentals, I'm talking about something as basic as the wealth formula, right? So the wealth formula is very simple. You need money, any kind of money, payroll, investment, inheritance, some kind of money. You need time, right? Time for that money to build up. Then you need a rate of return on that money. So whether it's in a fixed account, variable, in the market, doesn't matter. You need a rate of return. And then you need to offset this by taxes and inflation. So if we think about the wealth formula, there's components that have to be in place, and so that we can build wealth over time. So when I think about it, those who say, oh, I'll get to it later, we've lost the element of time. Those who say, well, I just don't have any money, right? You don't have to have a ton of money. And those who say, well, I'm not really getting a good rate of return, at my bank or wherever my money is. We can find those places that can help you at least offset inflation, which typically is around 3%. So when we think about how do we do it, why do we do it, when do we do it as soon as we possibly can, because then we can be consistent, and that consistency will help us along with our rate of return to be able to build something significant.
Right. And doing it as soon as you can kind of leads me into compound interest. I want to talk about that. And can we explain what it is and how it will benefit our young investors?
Absolutely. I love talking about compound interest. Actually, Albert Einstein came up with this way before our time. Okay. But how it works is, it is the element of how money will grow over time based on the rate of return that you're getting. So similar to what I was talking about with the wealth formula, there are components. So with the compound interest, you need to take whatever rate of return you're getting, right? Such as 3%, for example. You take that number, you simply divide it by 72. And the result will let you know when your money would double. So if we took 3, divide by 72, that would give us 24. So that means that it would take 24 years for our money to double. So for easy numbers, if I just had $1,000, maybe it came from a tax return. I put that $1,000 in a high yield savings account. They're saying they're going to give me 3% yield. So if I just put it in one time, never added any more principal, I just left it, it would take 24 years before that $1,000 becomes $2,000. So with that said, we understand that that is a financial concept and it works in our favor. But one thing for certain, either we need to put way more money in the accounts to get that 3%, and or we would need to get a higher rate of return to get further along. So the point is, wherever you can start, just start, right? Because these banks, they change their rates all the time, but we just have to be intentional about doing the things that we know will eventually play off in our favor.
And I kind of also want to talk about something you mentioned earlier about, people think they might need a lot of money to invest. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions young people have about saving for retirement. Is there any other misconceptions that they might think? That one I know is super common because I feel like people think you need so much to invest and you really don't. Just get started.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions. One is, that I've got time, which none of us know the day nor the hour, right? Not just for money matters, but if we're even going to be here, right? Be on this earth. We don't know. So just like with our health and wellness, we need to get to it as soon as possible. With our finances, get to it as soon as possible. With healing and building great relationships, we need to prioritize that as well. So I think that taking action in the time where it's on your mind would be something key to do. The other thing is, like you said, the people thinking that they need a lot. You only need a little if you're consistent and you have time and a rate of return. The other thing is, they think that it's not for me, right? Getting wealthy, being successful, it's not for me. And sometimes I feel like that can come from a place, sometimes we don't know where it comes from, but maybe it comes from, growing up. Maybe it comes from bad relationships. Maybe it comes from people not pouring into us like we would deserve. And so we get this negative self-worth element to it, and we feel like we're not entitled to have successful lives or, assets. And, if that's not your story, hooray, right? If you know your worth and you're ready to go for it, by all means, get started as soon as possible. But that's not everybody's story. And it takes a lot of mental and emotional work to get a person to say, one, I am worthy. Two, I can do this. And three, I can be that example for those that are watching.
A lot of young people might think they can't do it because they have maybe student loans or they're trying to buy a home or something. So how can we make retirement just as much as a priority as all those other savings goals?
Absolutely. And I will say this too, if we are fortunate to have employers, or even if we're self-employed and we build that within our structure, if we are fortunate to have a retirement account where we can contribute a certain amount, it doesn't even have to be like the 10% that, ideally you want to maximize it as much as possible, but you can put in 3 to 6%, because like we talked about a few moments ago, we have to offset inflation with anything that we're doing. And so if we're putting money away and we're at least contributing 3% of our income, and then we're getting some rate of return that's kind of helping with the minimal principal that we put in, the market is kind of catching us up in a way. And you can be consistent. And one day you'll look at that account balance and you'll be proud that you got started when you got started. And then, like anything else that we do, we're going to be so excited. We're going to want to amp it up 1 or 2 more%. That's gift to yourself is, I did this part. Now let me continue to do better. Let me continue to do more. And it will be easier because you have created a new positive habit.
Yeah, and anytime you maybe get like a little bonus at work or raise, you come into a little money, put that right towards it. So it's
Yep.
goes right there. That's always a good strategy, I think, to use of
Absolutely. That
saving.
extra money helps.
What are some accessible retirement accounts that our young investors can look into? You kind of mentioned if you have a company one, what else can we look into?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on your income. So if you are under a certain amount of income and you're using your after tax dollars, meaning the money that's gone to your checking or savings account after you've gotten paid, you could set up a Roth IRA. Now, the Roth IRAs are great because as long as you have or hold them for 5 years from the initiation of it, you won't be penalized if you need to touch the money. Now, normally when we have our retirement accounts, you have to be 59 and a half before you start touching that money to use for yourself. But when you have a Roth, you just have that 5 year hold where you're not taking anything from it. You're continuing to keep the account open. The other thing is, because you're using after tax money, that money is never going to be taxed again. So for in the future, when we know that taxes will continue to go up as they should, because we're trying to navigate this national budget that we have. But when we think about what we will need in our later years, we want non-taxable money to live off of, because at that point we might be on a more fixed income, such as our pension plans or our Social Security, and your Roth IRA could be a bucket that will supplement, that won't trigger a taxable event for you. And the since I mentioned Social Security, those are what we call tax advantaged, because as it has stood, only 85% of your taxable benefit of, I'm sorry, only 85% of your Social Security benefit would be subject to tax. So they have these brackets that your income falls in. And as long as it falls in a certain area, they'll never tax 100% of it. So again, if you have a tax advantaged lifetime income, you have your Roth account that you can pull from to supplement. Those are two incomes that you may have minimal or no taxes in your 60s.
And you might touch on Social Security. I just wanted to say that these are accounts in addition to that, because you can't really just live off like a Social Security or
Right,
kind of
right,
need your other account, which I think is kind of a common misconception. People might realize too late. So
right.
it's good to have the extra account too.
And to give you some reference, the average Social Security check is a little over $1,900 a month. Not even 2,000, right? So that's the average American having retired, and now they're on the poverty line. So it's definitely a good idea to have other buckets to pull from, so that you're not having to work part-time when you're retired. Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy what you do and you like to stay active and still continue to work, then let that be your option. But don't just do it because of money.
Yeah, or even just push off your full-time retire or push off retirement in general and working full-time a lot later than you
Hmm.
originally had planned. So, how should young investors approach risk when building a retirement portfolio? You want to kind of maybe touch on this?
Yeah, yeah. I love the risk question because it is so individual. Oftentimes you'll find that people will say, they'll try to put people in boxes, right? And they'll say, oh, well, when you're younger, you can take on more risk. And when you're older, you should kind of minimize risk. Generally speaking, that's the consensus. However, each person is entitled to and should have what they call a risk tolerance assessment. They will ask you a myriad of questions that will indicate how do you feel, or how could you feel if you saw your account balance at any time fluctuate by certain percentages. And there might be some people who are younger who would not like to see a bunch of volatility going on in their account balances. And that would not be the norm, right? They would say, I'm a bit more conservative. I want to see whatever I've put in that account, and I look in there, I want to see that money. But popular belief would say, oh, if you're younger, you've got 20, 30, 40 years to go. So just write it out. We've got to go with what they're comfortable with. You can always change your allocations, you can always diversify, but how this person feels at this moment is significant, right? And so when you do that risk tolerance assessment, it will give us a snapshot of how you feel about market movement, and we will allocate based on that.
Are there any common mistakes young investors will make when they're starting to invest in retirement that they can avoid?
I would say exhausting the accounts, right? Because the idea is, oh, I can just put it back. Exhausting the accounts. The other thing would be not being consistent, of course, and then getting into the more riskier investments where they're not fully knowledgeable about how they work. So I'll give, for example, like private placements. If you got a friend who's doing something and it sounds great and you're like, oh, I could be an investor in that. And you throw 20, 30,000 in because you support them and you want to be a part of it. And then it goes to put and you're like, well, who can I talk
And
to?
that's all you had. It's
Exactly. It's like,
all gone.
who can I talk to about that? Well, no one, because our investments are not insured, right? This is a part of the risk we take. Unless you're putting it into an established custodian and there was some kind of bankruptcy or fraud going on, then you have protections. But if we're just, improperly allocated, or we didn't do our due diligence, there is no protection for that.
Yeah, and do you think it's better to kind of put your eggs in different baskets when it comes to that, rather than 30,000 just in one thing? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I do believe in diversification, and that can be done in a myriad of ways. It can be done within your brokerage account, which is not tied to retirement. It is just an account where you have funds, and you can pretty much shop for assets. It could be stocks, bonds, ETFs. It could be a myriad of things. And you can diversify by asset class, or you could diversify by the industry that you're investing in. You can diversify by the amount of holdings that you have in any given class. So, I mean, I believe that there are a lot of different ways that we can take whatever money we have and put it somewhere where the goal is for it to grow, but the goal is also for us to be able to create a habit of managing our money better. So if we find that we have extra cash flow left over after we've paid our routine bills and our creditors, I say that cash flow is where options live. Cash flow is where options live. So when you have that cash flow left over, whether you're going to invest it in the market, whether you're going to get into real estate, maybe you become a homeowner or you want an Airbnb or something like that. Like there's a myriad of things that you could do with the cash flow. And that's why having a relationship with an investment advisor or a planner, someone like that will be helpful because they will look at your now, but they will also look at, okay, what you're projected to do, of course, if you're consistent and you put money into something that has the opportunity to appreciate.
Are there any specific investment vehicles or retirement strategies that work best? You find work best for younger individuals? Is there one that they lean towards more?
Yeah, I think that a lot of them like the self-directed accounts because they feel like, hey, I'm not ready for an advisor yet. I'm not ready for planning, but there are a myriad of self-directed accounts, like Merrill Edge, Schwab has some, where you basically open an account, you fund it with your first amount of money, and it gives you the liberty to pick what you'd like to pick. And then you can kind of assess for yourself if it's working or not. And then, of course, they can bump you up to a level where you can get, it's almost like a hybrid management. So they can give you advice one time and then you go from there, or you can pick up a management relationship. But I think that people like to be hands on, especially initially, so that they at least understand how to fund the account, how to move money around. And then, yes, there's usually a chat or a feature in these platforms where you could talk to one of the licensed professionals.
So once young people have kind of chosen how they want to invest and what vehicle works best for them, how can young people with, limited income, or I mentioned earlier high student loan debt, how can they make it a priority to make sure that they are actually investing in retirement?
Yeah, I was going to say the easiest thing to do, since most of us are concerned about our net pay versus gross, I would find that the easiest thing to do would be to contribute to your retirement plans at work because it's out of sight, out of mind. They contribute before you even get the money to your checking account, so you don't have to worry about it. It's like set it and forget it. But then again, going back to cash flow, once you do get your paycheck and you've assessed your budget and you see that you have something else, something left over, then I would say go ahead and try to open up one of those brokerage accounts outside of work where you can kind of get your feet wet around how this will work for you before you ever start to try to look for an advisor or someone like that. But remember, consistency is key. So even if you can't do the brokerage account or you can't do a separate, Roth on your own, just be consistent at what they're offering you at work. And then the blessing is if they offer you a match is free money. Oh my goodness. You're putting in principal every pay and they are putting in principal every pay. And what happens is usually over a 5-year vesting period, whatever your employer has put in on your behalf, every year you get to keep a fraction of that. So like maybe it's 20% a year. If you were to leave the company, once you would leave, you get a percentage of what they put in and you could take it with you to the next employer or you could roll it out into an IRA. So I would say prioritize what you can contribute. If your company is matching, that's free money. And after you vested, you could take the whole thing out when you go.
I was going to say that too with the if you're investing in your company's retirement fund, I think it's great because the money just comes out and you don't have to like think about it
Mhm.
coming out. It just comes out,
Yeah,
which I think that's the hard thing. Oh God, if you see it in your bank account first, you might be like, do I really want to put that towards something 40 years from now or 30
right,
years from now?
right.
So I love the automated. Just don't even see it. Set it and forget it.
Yeah,
So
we live in a microwave society, right? So if
yeah,
I see
we
it and I
do.
want it, I got it.
Right, right, exactly. It's like, do I really want to put this towards retirement? So yeah, I definitely think that that's a good strategy for the young investors is
Mhm.
to auto pay it. What role does financial education play in encouraging young people to invest in retirement? Because some people might not even really even know what it is. They might know what retirement is, but maybe not the financial aspect if they don't have any financial education.
Yeah, and the other thing is it's not sexy, right? It's not fun. It's not something you wake up every day and like, "Let me learn more about retirement." It is not. I try to make it fun. I do. I laugh a lot. I joke around a lot. I try to explain things in layman's terms. We even put out like toolkits and things to make it fun and accessible. But financial literacy is the key to everything that you want to do in your life. It is a life skill. To learn about money is a life skill, and you continue to have these building blocks, right? So, even when we're younger, when our parents are giving us an allowance, we're doing something where we're able to have a lemonade stand or whatever. We're getting our first exposure to touching, having, managing money, spending money. And some people get a thrill out of being able to have their own money and make their own decisions. But how much more of a thrill do we get when we're older and we're able to work and see the benefit of trading our time for money or trading our expertise for money, and then being able to say, okay, I did that, right? I made that 1,000, that 2,000. Now, if I'm in the driver's seat, what would I do with this so that it benefits me? So we all have our routine expenses, of course, if we're going to be living on our own. But beyond that, when I have extra money, where can I choose to put it now that I understand more about how money works? That is empowering, right? Because at the end of the day, once you learn that skill of how money works, now you can pass that on to others. You could be an example for your peers. They may come to you and say, how have you been doing this? Like, how have you been investing, or what platforms are you using? So not only are you doing it for yourself, but you are being that model for others to watch and see that it actually does work. When you understand, you apply, you're consistent, you see results.
Because a lot of the time, financial education is just word of mouth. Where did you hear that from? Because, you don't really necessarily hear it a lot in schools. It's not mandatory in
Right.
most states. So it is just word of mouth. So if you do know something, it is really good to pass on the information to your friends or one day your kids and
Hmm.
hopefully just keep it going. So kind of talked about we talked about automating to help fund our retirement account. Are there any other tools or apps to make retirement investing easier for the young investors?
There are a myriad of apps that you could use. I would say Schwab is very easy to access. They have the DIY accounts, and then they have the ones that you might need a representative to help you. But I would say, Google. Go on Google. I did, and I still do, to see who has the better rates, to see who has lesser fees, to see who has liquidity that is readily available for you if you're in a pinch. And I will say this, Katie, 59% as of this year, early this year, 59% of adult Americans do not have $1,000 for an emergency in a pinch. When you think about, that's more than half of the working people. So I always impress upon anyone, regardless of whether you're trying crypto or investing in retirement accounts, mutual funds, it doesn't matter. Our first priority is getting $1,000 stocked away for a myriad of emergencies that would come up. A tire blows, something happens at the house, like just routine things. Because again, you don't have to do a payday loan, you don't have to borrow, ask a friend, ask your parents. You can take care of it. You can be an independent adult who, yes, I built this savings up, I'm proud of it, but I just had to sock $700 away for some unexpected thing. And initially you will feel like a failure. You will feel like, goodness, I just got it in there. And now it's back down to 200 or 300. But if you understand what it's for, then that will take those feelings away. So that's what it's for. It's for you to be able to bounce back and be resilient when life happens. And if you could do that 1,000, you could do 10, you could do 20, you could build a retirement account. But building up that first emergency account, I would say, is the priority for most Americans.
Is there any advice you would give to someone who's hesitant to start investing for retirement today because they believe they're too young for that? What advice would you give?
Definitely never too young. This is the time. When I mean, I cannot tell you how many clients we have done the math, right? We have gone in, we've used the interest calculators, we've done all this stuff. They're like, oh, let's look at it for my 17-year-old son. They're like, okay, let's plug the numbers in. When I tell you the minimal amount of principal that you have to put in consistently, not even increasing it. If you started putting $50 away at 18 years old and you continue to put that same $50 away in the right accounts, right, where the growth is helping you, I mean, you could be a millionaire in no time. Not by increasing the principal, but by being consistent and letting the market help you. So if you are now waiting 5, 6, 7, 10 years to do that, now you got to put more principal in a shorter amount of time, which, affects how you can budget. It affects how much house you can get. It affects if you could pay your car off sooner. Like, it does affect it. So the sooner the better. I don't care if it's $5. Build that habit, be consistent, and then you know that you can increase it over time because you're not going from 0 to 50. You might be going from 5 to 20 or 20 to 25. That's easier to swallow, especially in today's economy.
And definitely start investing now. It is so, because young people don't really think about it, but yeah, it is super important to future-proof your finances. So guys, get started investing in your retirement now. But Dr. Constance, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation.
You're very welcome. I did enjoy it.
Yes, thank you again. Starting to save for retirement is one of the best ways to future-proof your finances. Thanks to the power of compound interest, even small contributions can grow significantly over time. Whether you're investing through your employer's retirement plan or an individual retirement account, the key is to start as soon as possible. And remember, you don't need a lot of money to begin. Start with what you can and make it automatic. Setting up recurring contributions removes the temptation to spend the money elsewhere and helps you stay consistent with your savings. And with that, we wrap up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Z, and everyone else tuning in. Bye.